Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. Really excited to talk to you today about a series that is in the Minor Threats universe. That being the universe, it's published over at Dark Horse, kind of the brainchild of Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum, who's joining us for the first time. And this particular series, which is called The Brood, is written by Heath Corson, who's returning to the show after a very long absence. So, first of all, let me say, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, so let's kick it off with you, Jordan. For anybody that's not familiar with the Minor Threats universe, let's give everybody an idea of overall what the universe is like, and then we'll get into some details of the Brood.
Yeah, so the Minor Threats universe was launched out of the original Minor Threats book, which was sort of about what happens to a bunch of D-list blue-collar supervillains when a A-list villain kills an A-list hero sidekick and life becomes hell for the little guy. And that kind of expanded into the alternates and Barfly and now the Brood. And for us, it's just about kind of telling really fun superhero stories, but from perspectives we never get to see, and anchoring these stories with a lot more emotion and character, I think, than sometimes they get. And he came in with an incredible pitch for a family drama about the world's greatest mad scientist, and it was absolutely exactly the kind of story that we're looking to tell.
Yeah, the Minor Threats universe, everybody, if you're not familiar with it, highly recommend it. Jordan mentioned a few of the other series that are out. And here's the thing, like whether you're a newcomer to comics or a casual reader, it's got something for you. It doesn't have this long, convoluted history where it's going to take you forever to catch up. But for someone like me who's been reading for a long time, and maybe you can speak to this, Heath, as well, this idea of the creators that are involved, and certainly this applies to you, Jordan and Patton, longtime comic readers, longtime comic fans. So it almost has this built-in sense of nostalgia, like you're playing in a world that sort of feels familiar because we've all read hundreds, if not thousands, of books in our lives. But to your point earlier, Jordan, about flipping it on its head and telling stories about people that maybe haven't gotten the spotlight before. Would you say that's kind of what you guys were going for initially when you created this, Jordan?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think it comes out of, we've also read comics our entire lives.
Right.
And what haven't we seen? And who are these characters, for instance, the Minor Threats, the kind of characters that Batman, or Spider-Man webs up to a telephone pole in the cold open. And instead of following Batman or the Joker, let's follow these guys and see why they got into this world and add some reality to this kind of fantastical world they inhabit. So that was always kind of the goal of what are the stories that fall through the cracks of comics, and what do these people have to say about living in a superhero world?
Let's throw it over to you, Heath. Were you aware, like right when the first series came out, did you right away read it and say, oh man, I have a fantastic idea? Like give us some idea of your history with Minor Threats and then the idea of Brood specifically.
Sure. Well, what's funny is I will give you my history with Jordan in particular, because Jordan and I, although we had followed each other on social media, we had never met. And then I had a disastrous experience over at Warner Animation with a project that had just crashed and burned. And I was talking to my exec, and he happened to mention that Jordan and Patton had also had an experience that didn't go anywhere. And I was like, I got to reach out to Jordan because I want to hear all about his project because it sounded awesome. Yeah. So I actually reached out to Jordan on social media and then held my breath for like 24 hours. And I was like, oh, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But people aren't always open to it. And then I got this lovely message from him, which was like, I would love to sit down and talk about this. This would be great. And then I was like, oh, but he goes, but I'm on the west side. And it turns out I'm on the west side of Los Angeles. Turns out we live like 5 blocks away from each other.
Wow.
So we went and got a cup of coffee and started just digging into our shared love of comics and storytelling and what we'd worked on. And he mentioned he was working on Minor Threats and they were looking for spinoffs. And did I have anything that might be in the vein? And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had read the series at that point. And what I loved is, some of the hallmarks of Minor Threats that I absolutely adore is the lived-in quality of it all. Yep. That it feels like there is a history here, and I know that is very much by design for Patton and Jordan. And like you said, Jace, it feels like if you've been reading comics for years and years, this is standing on the shoulders of all of that mythology and being able to reach like the really interesting, robust stories now. Like, we don't have to go back and say, okay, we don't have to explain who this character is or what this relationship is. It's like, we all know sort of the key that we're playing in. Now we can talk about moving forward. Like, what would it be like to be these D-level heroes or these D-level villains in this world just trying to get by? And I was like, this is fantastic. So I happened to pitch Jordan, this write-up of this idea that I had, which came from watching the Royal Tenenbaums and sort of realizing, oh, this is the continuing story of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, who had 3 kids and tried to put them in the family business. And what would that be like? And coming from a family, I'm the oldest of 4. So I love the idea of sibling stories. I love the idea of family stories. I love the idea of kids who have all experienced the same thing but don't see it in the same way. And so that was something I really wanted to do in a supervillain story, which is great because in superheroes you have good and evil, but those binaries don't really translate to a family, where everybody might be good, everybody might be evil at different times. So I thought it was really interesting to get to play with that within the realms of a family.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about this, and I'll give you both a chance to comment on it. Even when we go back to the very first Minor Threat series, one of the themes, and it's in the alternates as well, maybe with more found family, but one of the themes is this sense of belonging and legacy and family. And you don't always get along with your family, but you don't really have the choice of whether or not they're your family or not. And that theme certainly plays out here in The Brood. So maybe we'll have you comment on that first, Jordan, this idea of family or found family, legacy, the complicated relationships we have with our family. Is that something that interests you as a writer because it's so relatable?
I don't think you're a writer unless you have issues with your family. It kind of one goes hand in hand with the other. Yeah, and I think what I loved about The Brood is that all the dialogue, all the arguments and them kind of nitpicking each other, and it just was, it's so relatable. It's so what, if you have a family, you have these conversations, but they're happening in a, volcanic layer, or it's about, designing weapons to kill the searcher, but if you could strip that all away and it's everyone's family kind of being portrayed in this. If you have siblings, if you have parents you maybe don't always get along with, it just, there was never a moment where it leaned too heavy, I think, into the like the family stuff drove it. And I loved that. I loved that they're still having the same arguments that any of us have, but they're hiding the grandkids from the grandparents because they don't want their evil to rub off on them. And I think that's like so fun and so incredible. And Heath nailed it.
Yeah. What about you, Heath? I hope you have a better relationship with your family than these
I will tell you, just to sort of illustrate this point, I did just get advance copies of the very first issue, and my parents were visiting me that weekend, and my father notably did not read it. And I thought, and my friends were like, well, oh my God, how do you feel? Isn't that horrible that your dad didn't read it? I go, if my dad read it, there wouldn't have been a book for me to write. And so, not to put too fine a point on it, I think obviously it's exaggerated and it's dug in and it's writ large because it's on a supervillain canvas. But I do love all that intricacies of just siblings, and like you said, we can't pick our family, and just the fact that, like, would you be friends with these people if you weren't related to them? And I think that's really interesting. And what do we owe them? And we've seen the notion of legacy in comic books over and over and over again. And it's such rich history that what will happen when Batman retires? Is he going to give it to Dick Grayson? Is he going to give it, like, what is the notion of adopted son? What is the notion of responsibility to this idea or to this cause? Or just because you have this drive, do I need to serve it as well? And that's such an interesting idea because, family businesses are so sticky and interesting. And there was a moment with the youngest son Spook Show, who's become a very powerful black occult magician, and his father has no understanding of what it is he does. And that is very much torn from my real life because my dad, as a businessman, can't understand being a creative on any level. He doesn't understand me staring at a screen and trying to come up with things. That's just not what he understands on any level. So there's some real, I really wanted to ground it in some reality, in some real moments. And then that gave us some real interesting places to go when we could jump off into the larger stuff.
Yeah, and it's not even just the relationships between the kids and the parents, which is a fantastic name, Archimedes, Napoleon, just so fantastic, so iconic. And you definitely, to your point earlier, Jordan, feel that he's like the villain of the Minor Threats universe. But also the relationship between the siblings as well. There's a little bit of rivalry there. There's a little bit of, I understand what you do, even if, dad doesn't, he's dismissive, or whatever. And their personalities are so distinctive. So I think they're very fleshed out and they feel very rich and a lot to explore there as well. So, Jordan, I wonder, when Heath initially pitched it, do you recall, were all these characters in it initially? Was it something that you went back and forth, you and Heath talked about, or give us a little background there?
Yeah, well, the family was really kind of fully formed and fleshed out, and then we talked about like taking the pitch and integrating it into the world of Minor Threats, and we had the character, the Searcher, who's sort of our Superman analog, who we've been kind of having be a little bit of the connective tissue. She pops up in the alternates as a bigger character, and then little bits in Barfly and some of the other books. But it made sense to kind of flesh out the universe and say, okay, well, if this is our Lex Luthor and she's our Superman, where do they live? And Heath created this whole other, city, because we had Twilight City where the Minor Threats are. So he created Meteor Falls, and it was real fun in, helping him sort of world build with us and flesh out the universe. And, but really, yeah, all the big pieces were there. And then we all met up, I think it was at Patton's house, and he had his note cards, and we went through the series and, gave a few ideas and notes here and there. But really, I think this thing has been cooking in Heath's head for quite some time.
Yeah, everybody, when you find out why it's called Meteor Falls and kind of the connection with the Searcher, it's fantastic. Like Jordan's saying, just fantastic world building. When I saw that part, I was like, oh, of course they're mortal enemies, and it just made so much sense. It's so much fun. The other thing that I wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about found family and this idea of family as a legacy and what have you. But the other part of that is this idea of, I'm sure you guys know the expression, nobody picks on my little brother but me. And we sort of get that a little bit in the first Minor Threat series where, things go sideways, as Jordan was saying, with this sidekick getting killed, and the biggest hero, or of a Batman type hero, kind of loses it, and the villains decide, hey, we're going to go take out the villain that did this on our own, before the heroes really go crazy. And we get a little bit of that. I think it's in the third issue, Heath, of your series, where they don't get along, but when push comes to shove and their backs are against the wall, they do team up, they do work well together, they are a family that can sort of get along. So that seems like another kind of common theme that runs through the Minor Threats books, and I think there's a lot of value in that because, again, it's relatable. Like, we all get it, right? You pick on your brother when you're at home, but then when you're in school, if somebody picks on him, you're going to stand up for him. So was that purposeful, Heath? Did you get an idea and get that theme when you read the original books, and it was something you wanted to kind of have a through line?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I love the idea of found families. I do. I just love ensembles that are brought together for one reason or another and sort of stick together. And even though they might not love each other, it might not be all the happy time get along gang, they've got each other's backs.
Hmm.
And I think that's even escalated more if you're talking about siblings, you know, and it really is nobody else knows this experience better than my siblings, right? They were in the shit with me when we were in the volcanic layer, or, you know, so to speak, or whatever. You know, there was a year. There was a full. First of all, you need to know we never knew what my father did growing up. We never knew. He would pack a bag and he would go on business trips and he would come back and he was like, "Okay, I did it." And we were like, is he in the mafia? Is he a hitman? Like, what does he do? And we go, what did you do? And he goes, oh, I did business. And we're like, what kind of business? He was like, you know, business until it's done. And I think part of that was my dad not wanting to burden kids with the boringness of what his business was, but also like he knew that he could tweak our expectations a little bit and play with it and tease us. But we've still never been able to have that conversation. And I think I even heard him say at one point, yeah, my kids never really understood what it was I did growing up. And I always thought that was hilarious. So there was a full year where we would eat dinner. We always ate dinner at the same time. And the doorbell would ring. And my father would be eating and he'd look up and we'd all be like, the doorbell just rang. And my dad would go, nah, we're fine. I'm like, what do you mean we're fine? Someone's at the door. And he'd go, no. And we wouldn't answer the door. And that happened for a year. And what I eventually found out was they were trying to serve my father papers and he wouldn't answer the door.
That's awesome.
So that made me laugh. But here was the other aspect that I really wanted to play with in terms of Napoleon Archimedes and the Searcher is what if we looked at Napoleon Archimedes as a workaholic and the Searcher is his work wife? And so the kids are also resentful that yeah, you're going off and you're working all the time, Dad. And you spent my birthday in a pocket universe fighting your arch nemesis instead of being here with me. And I was like, what is it about growing up with a father who is such a workaholic and so devoted to destroying his arch nemesis that he actually doesn't have time to be with you? Or when he does, his shoulder got separated in the last battle that he had, or, you know, daddy's cornea got separated, so he can't actually roughhouse with you, so you've got to relax a little. So there was all these things that I thought were really relatable and interesting that now we could bring into a superhero world and talk about that.
Yeah, and again, it's fascinating, everybody. Fantastic story. The first issue is out December 11th, so that's going to be the week that this is released. So make sure you let your comic shop know, and also let them know to pre-order the subsequent issues because you're going to want them. You know, we know it's a crowded shelf space these days, so if you want to make sure to have it, let them know. The other thing that I want to talk about, we got to talk about the art because it definitely has its own kind of sensibility. Meteor Falls has its own kind of look and what have you. So let me ask you, Jordan, because there's been some different sorts of art styles in Minor Threats, and I love that you've done that. It's been an eclectic choice of artists rather than saying, hey, we're going to lean into one kind of look, and it's helping to make it feel like a very rich world. So in terms of selecting artists, is that something that you're aware of? You want to be able to have kind of different looks, and we've had diverse stories already?
Yeah, I think of it as like each book is sort of has its own subgenre. So if Minor Threats is sort of this crime noir, you know, dressed in spandex, you know, Scott Hepburn is so good at that. You know, he plays in the shadows and built this whole sort of supervillain underworld for our characters to traverse. And when we did the alternates, you know, it was very much this kind of experimental early 90s Vertigo vibe we wanted. So you know, Chris Mitten, to me, his art looked a lot like, you know, the Doom Patrol interiors.
Exactly.
Whereas as the other art in it, you know, looked, because we had two different artists on it, you know, Tess Fowler's stuff looked like the covers that were painted, you know. Yep. So we wanted to invoke that feeling of like, these are the adult comics characters, because that's what it was a support group for. And, you know, when we got to the Brood and all the talks we had with Heath, we're like, this is a Wes Anderson family drama, and who can we get that will bring that style to it? And I think Ian Colbard's pencils and inks and colors and the way that he designs pages and splash pages and the symmetry, it really feels more like an indie movie than a big action blockbuster. And that's the vibe we wanted, because all the characters are relics from the Silver Age and they are the big sci-fi things, but they need to be cast in the subgenre. And I think that's what Ian did so well.
Yeah, and I talk a little bit about the collaboration, Heath, because like Jordan mentioned earlier, a lot of these characters are fully formed, even at the time you had your initial pitch. So did that extend to the look of them? Did you work with Ian on character design? Did you just let him go wild? Tell us about that.
First of all, let me just call out again how great Ian Colbard is. Like, there is nothing in this book that is not Ian's look. So he's doing pencils, he's doing inks, he's doing the colors. So he has got this entire look of the book, and it's spectacular. Especially coming off of Barfly with Ryan Brown, which is so dense, and even Scott just does a really dense, packed, really just buzzing with energy, and to have something that's a little more streamlined and sleek. And I think Patton said once, like, it looks like an Apple store or something. Yeah. It's all just like really clean. It just gives it such a completely different feel in the entire book. So the funny thing about working with Ian, first of all, Ian's an absolute madman. He's as just detail oriented and as crazy and wants to dig into this as I do. So this actually started during the writer's strike, where I didn't have another outlet. So Jordan and I would go and strike at Sony and walk for a couple hours and carry our signs. And then I'd go home and I'd overwrite this stuff to Ian. And I wrote him this document that basically described all the characters, but it described like what they might wear and like how they would move, and talk about the acting, and like this is the way that Agatha might cross her arms over her chest because she feels self-conscious about her weight, because next to her mother she always feels bigger and uncomfortable, and so I wrote all this stuff, and then he started to sort of filter that into designs and started sending me some stuff that I wouldn't even have thought of. And really, isn't that the best part of comics, is you think, oh, I know exactly what I want, and then you send it to your artist and they give you something completely different and you go, oh my God, that's better. That's 100% better. So he really just he nailed down the hexagons for Napoleon Archimedes and making that the leitmotif for all of his futuristic equipment, and everything has sort of the hexagon in it. And that was 100% Ian bringing that wholeheartedly to the table, down to the entire map. So even though I said, okay, it's Meteor Falls and this whole place was basically sprung from an asteroid wiped out this 1880s port town, and then that drew all these interesting people who started to spring up to look at this meteor, and they built the city in the impact crater of the meteor, and that's why they sort of jokingly called it Meteor Falls, and then it sort of became this huge futuristic metropolis. And Ian told me I had to lay out the entire city before I could really figure out anything else. So he sent me like maps of a 3D map of the entire city. Like, here's where Tech Tower is, and here's the Copper Coast, and this is the Punch Bowl. And I was like, this is insane, and I love it so much, Ian. So I can't say enough about it. And that extended to the characters. He would give me all these different turnarounds, and I think we did a good 3 days on Agatha's hair. Like, he sent me some wild takes on her hair and like, what do you think of this look? What do you think of this? Does this feel too much? But really, he just took everything I suggested and knocked it out of the park, just lifted it so much bigger and better than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, those are the best kind of collaborations. It almost feels like lightning in a bottle when he's excited, that he's doing all this extra work, making a map and all that, as you are about bringing the project to life. That's awesome. Well, we mentioned before we started, Jordan, about what a great turnout you guys had at the comic book block party few weeks ago in LA. So obviously this is a few weeks from coming out. Barfly starring Shit Eater coming out right now. Obviously you've had the alternates and the two other Minor Threat series that have come out. Talk a little bit about the reception, because it really feels like you guys have built or are building a community that's sort of based around this. And going back to what we said before about so many of us that have been reading comics for years can relate to these kind of stories, and they're a lot of fun. So does it feel like there's a community that's been built up around the world of Minor Threats? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, every time we get even just a piece of fan art, we lose our mind. We have a text exchange. We start like, "This is so cool! Someone drew our characters," and seeing, you know, the other artists who do the variant covers and stuff. It's just a thrill every time there's the universe lives on and through someone else's words or art. So that's been incredible. And I think what we've tried to create is this outlet for people who have read comics their whole lives and like, what's the one superhero story you never got to tell at Marvel or DC that, you know, you got in your pocket that you've been wanting to do forever? And like, and so I think you find that joy in a lot of these pitches, which are like, this is everything I've wanted to say about comics that I you know, having read my whole life. So we try to find people who are excited to play in that universe, and we've been very lucky. Like we have some big announcements coming about an anthology book where people who inspired us, you know, as readers are now writing and drawing our characters and their own new ones as well. So it's really cool to just see it grow organically, and I feel like we've been, you know, very lucky to like maintain hopefully a level of quality that, you know, when you read a Minor Threats book, it really does have something to say. It really does have a different perspective and isn't more of the same. Because like you said, there's crowded shelves out there, and we try to pack them with as much story and beautiful art as we can. I think we're all readers, so we're always like, oh, this thing is, they're just dragging this story out. And it's like, I love that we usually have about 4 issues to tell this, our magnum opus, and it forces you to really put you know, the best work forward, and I think you'll see that in the Brood for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's so great about it, everybody. Like Jordan was saying earlier when he was talking about the different art styles, how they kind of evoke a familiarity, and these characters sort of evoke a familiarity. But the other part of this is, but even though it feels familiar, it's going to go in a direction that you don't necessarily expect. Heath and I were talking about this before we started recording. We have read so many comics, right? And so to be able to read something that has some tropes that you're used to seeing, or has art that evokes, you know, a certain period of time, but then to not know where the story's going, or think you know and have it flip around and go in a different direction, that's just joy for a comic book reader. So Heath, when you were pitching this, knowing, you know, a lot of what Jordan was saying about, hey, the story you haven't had a chance to tell or whatever, as a creator, like how exciting is that to say, hey, yes, I'm going to be able to bring in some ideas that are familiar and maybe some looks that are familiar, but I'm going to get to go in whichever direction I want. That's got to be like really exciting and kind of gets you amped up to do your best work, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it is probably one of the best things I've done for a long, long time, because it's getting to play in a sandbox that I love. I mean, and the fact that I got to step into this world and get to shape some stuff, stand on the shoulders of Patton and Jordan, and create some of the mythology to hang up there in the sky, and also get to tell a very personal story is kind of amazing. You know, like I don't think I've been able to do something this personal in genre of, you know, that I can even remember. So get the chance to do that. And then, like Jordan said, how exciting it was to like borrow some of their characters and then go, it feels like you've got a great guest star who shows up on a show or something. You're like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Look, we got Searcher, or, you know, we got Toy Queen. Look at this. You know, one of the best things I got to do was I got to create my own Legion of Doom with Napoleon Archimedes. And I literally created like 12 characters that I thought could be in the Minor Threats Legion of Doom. Like, my joke that I would say to Jordan and Patton is like, yeah, these are the minor threats, but now let's go to the majors. Here are the major threats. Like, these are the huge guys who are up there in the Legion of Doom skull. And I put Toy Queen in the Legion of Doom because, Toy Man's in the Legion of Doom. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if for this one time she had, shot above she fought above her weight and she was in this group and, that's going to pay off down the road. But what a thrill to have these guys just be so nice and go like, yeah, play with the toys. We don't care. Add to this mythology. It's just been an incredible experience.
Well, it's a great organic way to build the universe too, because you have somebody else that's going to come in and maybe they pick up some of those characters that you created and bring them in and flesh them out. And it's everybody, working together with this kind of the same sensibility, with the same goal, right? To make really great comics because we love comics, right? Because, I'm sure this is true for you, Heath, and you, Jordan, right? You said, well, I want to be rich, so I'm going to make comics, right? That's why everybody gets into creating comics.
The change, yep. Nothing makes Prince money more than the comic business.
Nobody does that. They get into creating comics because they love creating comics. So, again, everybody, the first issue of Brood releases on December 11th, this coming Wednesday. As I said, don't forget, let your local comic shop know to pre-order you the subsequent issues so you don't miss out. And as we're winding down here, I'll throw it over to you first, Jordan. Anything else you want to let our audience know that they should be on the lookout for, or anything else to share?
Yeah, so Minor Threats, The Fastest Way Down, which is Volume 2, the trade just came out. So if you want to catch up on 1 and 2, you can read that. Barfly number 4 comes out in December as well. And then we have some big announcements coming out. And just to kind of restate, like, I think the other thing we try to do is that every number 1, you should be able to come in and you don't need to have read any of the previous stories in Minor Threats. The stories don't serve continuity. Continuity serves the story. And so there's fun things in the background. And like he said, characters popping in, but ultimately you should be able to just sit down and read it and enjoy it without having any previous knowledge. So if you haven't read Minor Threats, doesn't matter. Go check out the Brood. And if you like the Brood, then go check out the previous Minor Threats.
100%. What about you, Heath? Any last thoughts?
Just check out the book. Let me know what you think. Hit me up on the socials. And I just want to talk about it. I'm so excited for people to get this book in their hands and hear what they think.
So where is
also, there's no world where it doesn't get me in trouble come these holidays. When my family actually does read it, they will absolutely find all the stuff that my mother read the first issue and all she could talk about was the one joke where the wife says that her genius Lex Luthor husband is a genius at many things but can't load the dishwasher. And that is a complaint that my mother has always had about my father, and one that I have about my own wife.
That is awesome. Well, if people want to follow on social media or give their thoughts, where's the best place? Where are you most active?
Hit me up on Instagram at H Corson. That's the easiest place.
Great. And what about you, Jordan?
Bloom Jordan, and I'll say Blue Sky now blowing up.
Blue Sky now.
The community has made the jump, so that's fun. And the same thing on Instagram as well.
Great. So I'll put links to the social media and the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding either Heath or Jordan, just go and click there. So again, I love the book, Heath. It's absolutely fantastic. And congrats on the success of Minor Threat so far, Jordan. What you and Patton are doing is something really special. And the fact that you're getting talented creators like Heath and Ian to show up and create is just a testament to that fact.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Jace.
Yep, always a good time. Always a good time. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to the audio-only feed. Heath, Jordan, and I want to thank you for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.